The war had already begun to tear the Seven Kingdoms apart when Tyrion Lannister first heard the name Jon Snow spoken with something close to respect. He was in King's Landing, sitting in a council meeting that smelled of fear and wine. His sister Cersei was raging as usual, blaming everyone but herself for the growing chaos. His nephew Joffrey was bored, cruel eyes shining whenever someone mentioned executions, and their father, Tywin Lannister, stood like a mountain made of cold stone. "The North gathers strength," Tywin said calmly. "Robb Stark has won 2 battles already." Tyrion leaned back in his chair, pretending to study his cup. Robb Stark, the young wolf. A boy leading men twice his age into battle and winning. It reminded Tyrion of someone else from the north, a bastard boy at Winterfell who had once treated him with simple kindness. Jon Snow. Tyrion remembered the cold courtyard of Winterfell years ago. He remembered how Jon had listened when others mocked him, a bastard speaking to a dwarf like they were equals. In a world full of pride and cruelty, that small respect had stayed with Tyrion. Now war was everywhere. The Starks wanted justice for Ned Stark's death. The Lannisters wanted control. And Tyrion knew one thing clearly. Joffrey on the throne was a disaster waiting to explode. That night, Tyrion drank alone in his chamber, staring at the map of Westeros. He had always said he drank and knew things. What he knew now was simple. If the Lannisters continued on this path, they would drown in their own arrogance. What if, he whispered to himself, the lion changed sides? It sounded mad. Treason against his own blood. His father would call it weakness. Cersei would call it betrayal. But Tyrion had never felt truly loved by his family. He was useful, clever, but never trusted, never respected. Never respected. In the north, he had felt something different. Not love, but honesty. A knock came at his door. It was Varys, the master of whisperers, soft voice, quiet steps. "You look troubled, my lord," Varys said gently. "Tell me something," Tyrion replied, swirling his wine. "If the Starks win, what happens to men like us?" Varys smiled faintly. "We survive. We always do." "Not always," Tyrion said. "Sometimes survival requires imagination." Varys tilted his head. "Imagination can be dangerous." "So can loyalty," Tyrion answered. Over the next few days, Tyrion began to listen more carefully. His spies whispered about Robb Stark's victories. They whispered about a young commander fighting beside him. Not Jon Snow, but word had reached King's Landing that Jon had taken the Black and gone to the Wall. Even there, trouble was rising. Wildlings gathering, strange stories of dead men walking. The realm was breaking from every side. Tyrion saw what his father refused to see. The North would not kneel easily. Killing Ned Stark had created a wound too deep to close with threats. If the war continued, thousands would die. And in the end, maybe even the Lannisters would fall. One evening, Tyrion made a decision that would change everything. He called for a trusted sellsword, a man with no love for banners or lions. He gave him a sealed letter. "This goes to Robb Stark," Tyrion said quietly. "You will travel by night. If you are caught, you never heard my name." The man looked confused but nodded. "And if he kills the messenger?" the sellsword asked. Tyrion gave a small smile. "Then at least I will know the boy has grown into a man." Inside the letter, Tyrion had written something no Lannister had ever dared to write. "I did not kill your father, and I do not believe this war will end well for either of us. We have a common enemy, pride and madness on the Iron Throne. If you want peace, send word." Days passed. Each day felt heavier than the last. Tyrion continued playing his role in the council, advising, drinking, making jokes. But inside, he was waiting. Then one night, another knock came. The sellsword had returned. "He read it," the man said. "He did not kill me." Tyrion raised an eyebrow. "That is promising. He says he will meet you, but not in King's Landing, and not alone." Tyrion felt his heart beat faster. "Where?" he asked. "Near the Riverlands. Secret location. And there's more." "What more?" "What more? Robb Stark will not be the only one there. He says a man of the Night's Watch is traveling south on urgent business. A man named Jon Snow. For the first time in many years, Tyrion Lannister felt something close to hope. A lion, a wolf, and a bastard of the North. If they joined hands, the Game of Thrones would never be the same. And far beyond the wall, in the cold darkness where no king ruled, something ancient was beginning to wake. Something that cared nothing for lions or wolves. The real war was coming, and Tyrion had just taken the first step toward changing history. The journey to the Riverlands was cold and quiet, and for once Tyrion Lannister did not travel with golden banners or trumpets announcing his name. He rode in simple armor, a dark cloak covering the red and gold of his house. Only 2 trusted guards rode with him. No lions, no pride. Just a man risking everything. As he crossed burned villages and empty fields, he saw what war truly looked like. Homes turned to ash, dead horses left on the roadside, children staring with hollow eyes. This was not glory. This was madness. Tyrion felt a heavy weight in his chest. "This is what my family fights for," he muttered to himself. A chair made of swords. After 2 days, they reached the meeting place, an old ruined tower near a forest edge. Stark soldiers were already there, watching from the trees like silent shadows. Bows were drawn but not released. One rider stepped forward, tall, young, wearing wolf fur over armor. His eyes were sharp and serious. Robb Stark. He looked even younger than the stories had made him sound, but there was something strong in the way he sat his horse, confidence mixed with pain. "So," Robb said calmly, "the lion comes alone." Tyrion gave a small smile. "Not alone. I brought my height with me. It rarely leaves." The Stark soldiers did not laugh, but Robb's lips moved slightly, just a little. "You wrote that you did not kill my father," Robb said. "Why should I believe you?" Tyrion met his eyes. "Because if I had killed him, I would not risk my life coming here. I am clever, not suicidal." Silence fell between them. The wind moved through the trees. Then another rider approached from the opposite side of the clearing. Black cloak, long dark hair, a sword at his side. Jon Snow. For a moment, Tyrion forgot the war. He remembered Winterfell. He remembered a lonely boy standing apart from his own family. But Jon Snow was not a boy anymore. His face was harder now, his eyes colder. Jon dismounted and stepped forward. "You look taller," Tyrion said softly. "And you look the same," Jon replied. There was no smile, only tension. Robb looked between them. "You know each other?" "We met at Winterfell," Jon answered. "He gave me advice once." "And did you follow it?" Tyrion asked. "Yes," Jon said quietly. "I remember who I am." The words hung heavy in the air. Robb finally spoke again. "You say we have a common enemy." "Yes," Tyrion said. "Joffrey and the chaos around him. My sister feeds his cruelty. My father feeds his ambition. And the realm bleeds." "And why betray your own blood?" Robb asked. Tyrion looked at the burned land around them. "Because blood alone does not make family," he said. "Honor does. And sense. My family has lost both." Jon stepped closer. "I did not come south for politics," he said. "I came because the wall is in danger. Wildlings gather in numbers never seen before. And there are darker rumors. Dead men walking in the snow. Some Stark soldiers shifted nervously. Robb frowned. Stories to frighten children. Jon shook his head. "I have seen things. Things that do not die easily." Tyrion listened carefully. He saw no fear in Jon's face, only certainty. "The Night's Watch is weak," Jon continued. "We need men, supplies, unity. If the North fights the South or something worse grows beyond the wall, we are all fools." Tyrion slowly nodded. "That," he said, "is why I am here." Robb looked confused. "Explain." Tyrion took a breath. "What if," he said carefully, "this war ends differently? Not with your head on a spike, not with my house burning, but with a new alliance." Robb's eyes narrowed. "You ask me to trust a Lannister?" I ask you to trust a man who sees the bigger threat, Tyrion replied. Jon studied Tyrion closely. What are you offering? Jon asked. Tyrion's voice dropped lower. I can weaken King's Landing from the inside. I know its secrets, its defenses, its weaknesses. In return, when the time comes, the North stands with me against Joffrey. And after? Robb asked. After, Tyrion said, we prepare for what comes from the true North. The forest grew silent. Even the wind seemed to wait. Robb dismounted and walked closer, standing face to face with the Lannister. If this is a trick, Robb said quietly, I will hunt you myself. Tyrion did not look away. If this is a trick, he answered, I deserve it. Jon finally spoke. There is truth in his words, he said. I don't trust his family, but I trust that he hates what they are becoming. Robb looked at his half-brother for a long moment, then back at Tyrion. This changes everything, Robb said slowly. If we do this, there is no turning back. Tyrion smiled slightly. My life has never had a safe path, Your Grace. Robb's jaw tightened at the title, but he did not correct him. The lion, the wolf, and the crow stood together in the ruins of an old tower. 3 men from different worlds, and far in the frozen lands beyond the wall, blue eyes opened in the darkness, watching, waiting. Continue next part, more interesting in 700 words. The night grew colder as the 3 of them moved inside the broken tower. Stark guards stayed outside, watching every shadow. Tyrion could feel their eyes on his back, ready to kill him at the smallest wrong move. He did not blame them. Inside, a small fire burned. The light danced across cracked stone walls. Robb stood near the flames, strong and silent. Jon remained near the doorway, like a man who was used to watching for danger. Tyrion stepped forward slowly. If we are to risk treason together, he said, we should at least speak openly. Robb nodded once. Speak, then. Tyrion took a deep breath. My father plans to crush the North completely. He will not accept peace. He believes fear is stronger than respect. And he is sending more men every week. Robb's jaw tightened. Let him come. He will, Tyrion replied calmly. But that is not the true danger. Jon stepped closer. King's Landing. Yes, Tyrion said. The city is unstable. Joffrey grows more cruel by the day. The people whisper. If the city falls into chaos, thousands will die. And if Stannis or Renly takes the throne by force, the war will only change faces. Robb crossed his arms. So what do you suggest? Tyrion's eyes sharpened. I suggest we remove Joffrey from power. The words fell heavy in the room. Robb stared at him. You are speaking of killing a king. I am speaking of saving a kingdom, Tyrion corrected. Jon's voice was low. And who sits on the throne after? Tyrion paused. That question was the most dangerous of all. Not a Lannister, he said carefully. Not while I breathe. Robb studied him closely. You would betray your own house completely. You would betray your own house completely. Tyrion laughed softly, but there was no joy in it. My house betrayed me the day I was born. I owe it nothing. Silence followed. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance. Jon finally spoke again. Even if Joffrey falls, your father will never accept it. Tywin Lannister does not bend. Tyrion's face darkened slightly at his father's name. My father believes he controls the game, but he underestimates something. What? Robb asked. Me. For a moment, there was a flicker of fire in Tyrion's eyes. I know the city's defenses. I know which lords secretly hate Joffrey. I know which guards can be bribed and which cannot. If the right moment comes, I can open the gates. Robb stepped forward. You would hand us King's Landing. I would hand you a choice, Tyrion replied. Victory without slaughter, but only if we move carefully. Victory without slaughter. Jon frowned. And what do you want in return? Tyrion turned to him. When the war in the south slows, the north must prepare for what you've seen beyond the wall. Robb looked at Jon. You truly believe this threat is real? Jon did not hesitate. Yes, he stepped closer to the fire, his face half in shadow. I fought whites, dead men with blue eyes. Steel barely stops them. Fire does. And there are thousands of wildlings moving south, running from something worse. Robb's expression shifted from doubt to concern. If this is true, Robb said slowly, then all this fighting between us is foolish. Exactly, Tyrion said quietly. The wind outside suddenly grew stronger. The fire flickered wildly. A Stark guard rushed inside, breathing hard. Your Grace, he said to Robb. Riders approach. Lannister banners. Tyrion's heart dropped. That's impossible, he whispered. No one knew I was here. Jon's hand went to his sword. Robb's eyes turned cold. How many? Robb asked. 20, maybe more. Tyrion's mind raced. Had his father discovered his plan? Had Varys betrayed him? Or worse, Cersei? Robb turned to Tyrion slowly. If this is a trap. It isn't, Tyrion said firmly. If my father wanted you dead, he would send hundreds. Jon moved toward the doorway. We don't have time. Robb made a quick decision. We split. Jon, take 10 men through the forest path. Tyrion goes with you. Tyrion blinked. With him. If my men see you riding beside Jon Snow, they won't shoot you, Robb said. And if this is betrayal, he can kill you himself. Jon gave Tyrion a sharp look. Don't slow me down. Tyrion sighed. I will try to keep up with your heroic speed. Outside, the sound of horses grew louder. They mounted quickly. Jon led the way into the dark trees, Stark soldiers surrounding them. Tyrion struggled to keep pace as branches scratched at his cloak. Behind them, shouts echoed. Steel clashed. Robb had stayed behind. Tyrion felt guilt twist inside him. If he dies because of this, he began. Jon cut him off. Then your alliance dies with him. They rode hard through the forest, the moonlight barely guiding their path. After what felt like hours, they stopped near a frozen stream. The sounds of pursuit were gone. Jon dismounted first. You have enemies in your own house, Jon said quietly. Tyrion looked up at him. Yes, he answered, and now they know I've moved against them. Jon's eyes were serious. Then this war just became bigger. Tyrion nodded slowly. Far to the north, beyond the wall, snow began to fall over an army of silent figures with glowing blue eyes. The game was changing, and there was no turning back now. The forest was too quiet. Jon Snow stood still beside the frozen stream, listening carefully. The Stark soldiers were breathing hard from the ride, their horses restless. Tyrion slid down from his saddle with difficulty, his legs aching. He was not built for long escapes through dark woods. Your brother stayed behind, Tyrion said quietly. Jon did not answer at first. His eyes were fixed on the darkness behind them. Robb knew the risk, Jon finally said. He would not run from 20 men. Steel suddenly clashed faintly in the distance. Then a scream. Tyrion felt his stomach tighten. That doesn't sound like 20. Jon's jaw hardened. No. Another Stark scout appeared from the trees, breath shaking. It's more than we thought. At least 50. And they're not just Lannister men. Whose banners? Jon demanded. The scout hesitated. Bolton. Jon demanded. The scout hesitated. Bolton. The name felt like cold ice sliding down Tyrion's spine. Roose Bolton, Tyrion whispered. But he fights for Robb. Jon's eyes turned dark. For now. In that moment, everything changed. If House Bolton had turned against Robb Stark, then this was not just a small attack. This was betrayal from inside the North itself. Jon grabbed the scout. Where is Robb? Still fighting near the tower. Surrounded. Without another word, Jon mounted his horse again. We're going back, he said. Tyrion blinked. Back? Into 50 men. Jon looked down at him. You wanted an alliance. It begins now. The Stark soldiers nodded without hesitation. Loyalty ran deep in them. Tyrion cursed under his breath, but climbed back onto his horse. "If I die tonight, I hope someone writes a clever song about it." They rode hard toward the sounds of battle. As they reached the clearing near the ruined tower, chaos filled the air. Torches burned wildly. Stark men were fighting desperately, but Bolton soldiers in flayed-man banners had joined Lannister riders. Robb Stark stood in the center, sword moving fast, wolf sigil shining red with blood. He looked fierce, not like a boy but a king born in fire. But he was outnumbered. Jon did not hesitate. He charged straight into the fight. "For the North!" one of the Stark men shouted. Tyrion stayed slightly behind but pulled a dagger from his belt. He was not the strongest fighter, but he was not useless. He saw a Bolton soldier rushing toward Robb from behind. Without thinking, Tyrion urged his horse forward and threw his dagger. The blade struck the man in the throat. Robb turned just in time to see the soldier fall. Their eyes met for a second across the battlefield. That second mattered. Jon reached Robb's side, cutting down another attacker. "Bolton has betrayed us," Jon shouted over the noise. Robb's face was full of controlled fury. "I see that." More Stark soldiers began arriving from the forest. The numbers slowly shifted. Lannister men started pulling back, realizing the attack had failed. But something was wrong. Tyrion noticed that the Lannister commander did not look surprised. He looked satisfied. The commander shouted one final order before retreating. "Fall back. The message is delivered." Message. As the enemy forces disappeared into the trees, silence slowly returned to the clearing. The ground was covered in bodies. Smoke rose into the cold night air. Robb stood breathing heavily, blood on his face but not his own. "What message?" Jon asked grimly. Before anyone could answer, a horn sounded from the north, long, deep, terrifying. Every man froze. Jon's face drained of color. "That's not a Stark horn," he whispered. Another horn answered in the distance. Then another. Tyrion felt fear crawl up his back. From the northern tree line, figures began to appear. Not charging, walking, slowly, dozens at first, then hundreds. Their armor was old and broken, their movements unnatural, and their eyes glowed blue in the darkness. One of the Stark soldiers dropped his sword. "Seven, save us." Jon stepped forward, voice shaking but strong. "They followed me." The dead army moved closer, silent except for the crunch of frozen ground beneath their feet. Robb looked at Jon in disbelief. "This is what you meant?" "Yes." The Bolton betrayal suddenly made terrible sense. "They knew," Tyrion whispered. "Someone in the south knows about this. That attack wasn't meant to kill you." Robb's expression turned sharp. "It was meant to weaken us." Jon drew his sword slowly. "Steel won't be enough." Tyrion's mind raced. "We need fire," he said quickly. "Burn the bodies, all of them." The Stark soldiers hesitated only for a second before moving. Torches were grabbed. Oil was poured. The first of the dead reached the edge of the clearing. A Stark soldier slashed one across the chest. The creature did not scream. It simply kept coming. Jon cut another down, but it rose again. Then Robb threw a torch onto a fallen corpse. Flames erupted. The dead body shrieked as fire consumed it. That was the answer. "Burn them," Robb shouted. The clearing turned into a battlefield of fire and ice. The living fought desperately, pushing the dead back with flame. Tyrion grabbed a torch himself, heart pounding. He never imagined fighting monsters beside a Stark king, but here he was, the lion, the wolf, and the white shadows of death closing in. And somewhere far away, in the safety of King's Landing, Tywin Lannister was already planning his next move. Fire turned the night into chaos. Flames rose high around the ruined tower, lighting the terrified faces of the living and the empty blue eyes of the dead. Smoke burned Tyrion's throat as he swung his torch wildly at a corpse that refused to stay down. One of the whites grabbed a Stark soldier and bit into his neck like a wild animal. The man screamed, but the sound ended too quickly. Jon Snow rushed forward and drove his sword through the creature's chest, then kicked it into the fire. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. "Hold the line!" Robb shouted, his voice steady even in horror. Tyrion had seen battles before. He had seen men die. But this was different. These enemies did not fear pain. They did not retreat. They did not speak. They just kept coming. More shapes appeared in the darkness beyond the trees. Hundreds, maybe thousands. "This is not an army," Tyrion muttered, breath shaking. "This is a nightmare." Jon heard him. "No," Jon said. "This is only the beginning." Suddenly, a deeper sound echoed through the night, like cracking ice. The whites stopped moving forward for a second. Then the crowd of dead parted. A tall figure stepped through them. Armor, dark as frozen steel. Crown of ice. Blue eyes, brighter than the rest. The Night King. Even from a distance, the cold around him could be felt. Frost formed on the ground where he walked. Robb stared in disbelief. "That is no man." Jon's face was pale but filled with anger. "He commands them." The Night King slowly lifted his hand. Every dead body on the battlefield began to rise. Even the Stark and Bolton soldiers who had just fallen. Tyrion felt his heart drop into his stomach. This cannot be happening. The dead men who had once fought beside them now turned with empty eyes. One Stark soldier whispered, "Mother." Then he attacked his own friend. Panic spread fast. "We can't win this here." Tyrion shouted over the noise, "We need to retreat." Robb hesitated. Leaving the field felt like defeat, but this was not a normal war. Jon grabbed his brother's arm. "He's right. We must survive this." Another wave of whites charged. Robb finally nodded. "Fall back, to the horses." The living began pulling away, dragging the wounded. Fire slowed the dead but did not stop them completely. Jon ran toward Tyrion as a white lunged at him from the side. Jon cut it down just in time. "Stay close," Jon said firmly. Tyrion managed a weak smile. "I was hoping you'd say that." They mounted quickly. Horses screamed in fear as the dead closed in. Robb looked back one last time at the ruined tower, now burning fully in flames. "We ride north," he ordered. "To Winterfell." Jon's eyes widened. Winterfell. Jon's eyes widened. Winterfell. If this is where the threat truly is, the North must see it with their own eyes. They rode hard through the night. Behind them, the army of the dead did not chase fast. They simply walked forward slowly, unstoppable, as if time itself belonged to them. After hours of riding, they finally stopped near a hill overlooking a frozen valley. The men were exhausted. Many were wounded. Some cried silently in shock. Tyrion climbed down slowly, hands trembling. "I suppose," he said softly, "this is the part where I admit you were right." Jon stood beside him, staring into the distance. "I wish I wasn't." Robb joined them, face dark and thoughtful. "Bolton betrayal," Robb said slowly. "Lannister attack, and then this." Tyrion looked at him carefully. "My father would never believe in this threat," Tyrion said. "But if someone in King's Landing knows, then someone is working with them," Jon finished. The thought hung heavy between them. Robb turned toward Tyrion. "You said you could weaken the throne from inside." "Yes." "Then you must go back." Tyrion blinked. "Back?" Tyrion blinked. "Back, after tonight. If the South does not understand what is coming, we will stand alone." Jon nodded. "And alone we die." Tyrion looked between the two brothers. He had risked everything already. His family would suspect him. Cersei would want his head. Tywin would call him traitor. But if he did nothing, the dead would swallow all of Westeros. He sighed deeply. "I always did have terrible luck with family," he muttered. Robb placed a hand on his shoulder. "If you survive this, Tyrion Lannister, the North will remember." For the first time, Tyrion felt something he had never truly known among his own blood: respect. Far in the valley below, blue eyes glowed in the darkness like cold stars. The Night King watched the three riders on the hill, and slowly he smiled. The real war had begun. The wind howled across the frozen hill as Tyrion prepared to leave. The Stark soldiers were building a temporary camp, but no one truly rested. Every man kept looking north, afraid that glowing blue eyes would appear again in the dark. Jon stood beside Tyrion's horse, tightening the saddle straps himself. "You don't trust my riding skills?" Tyrion asked lightly. "I don't trust the road south," Jon replied. "It's worse." Robb approached, wearing a thick wolf cloak now stained with dried blood. He looked older than he had just days ago. "The Boltons will spread lies," Robb said. "They'll say I died tonight, or that I lost." "Let them talk," Tyrion answered. "Rumors are weapons. I know how to use them." Robb gave a small nod. "You'll need proof. Words won't be enough." Jon reached into his pouch and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He handed it to Tyrion. Tyrion carefully opened it. Inside was a broken piece of black obsidian, dragonglass. "It kills them," Jon said quietly. "I used it once at the wall." Tyrion stared at the sharp, dark stone. "So fire and this," he murmured. "Good to know death has weaknesses. Take it to King's Landing," Robb said. "Show them." Tyrion wrapped it carefully and placed it inside his coat. "If your father refuses to listen," Jon asked. Tyrion gave a bitter smile. "My father never listens, but the city listens. The small folk, the frightened lords. Fear spreads quickly." Robb stepped closer. "And if the throne moves against you?" Tyrion paused. "Then I will remind them that a cornered lion is still dangerous." There was a moment of silence between the three men. This alliance had been born in fire and betrayal. Now it stood on hope alone. Jon extended his hand first. "For the living," he said. Robb placed his hand over Jon's. "For the North." Tyrion looked at their hands, then added his own. "For survival." The pact was sealed. Tyrion rode south before sunrise with a small escort of Stark men who would leave him halfway. The road was tense. Every shadow looked like danger. Every traveler seemed like a spy. 2 days into the journey, they reached a burned village. Bodies lay in the snow, but these were not killed by swords. Their flesh was pale, frozen, eyes wide open. One of the Stark men swallowed hard. "They're ahead of us." Tyrion dismounted slowly, examining one of the corpses. "No wounds, just cold. They're spreading fear," he whispered. "Not rushing, advancing, advancing." Jon had said it before. This was only the beginning. By the 3rd day, the Stark escort turned back. Tyrion continued alone. As he approached King's Landing, the familiar sight of the Red Keep rose in the distance. The city looked normal, busy, loud, alive. It felt wrong. How could people laugh and trade and argue while death walked toward them? At the gates, Lannister guards recognized him quickly. "My Lord Tyrion," one of them exclaimed. "We thought you were still in the Riverlands." "So did I," Tyrion muttered. Inside the Red Keep, whispers followed him. News had already reached the capital of Bolton movements in the north, and worse, word had spread that Tyrion had disappeared without clear orders. Varys met him first in a quiet corridor. "You vanished," Varys said softly. The Queen was furious. "I was sightseeing," Tyrion replied. "The north is lovely this time of year, very dead." Varys studied his face carefully. "You've seen something?" "Yes." That single word carried weight. Later that evening, Tyrion was summoned to the small council chamber. Cersei stood near the window, wine in hand. Joffrey sat lazily in the king's chair, and Tywin Lannister stood tall at the head of the table. The lion's den. Tywin's eyes were cold. "You left without permission," he said calmly. "I went to gather information," Tyrion replied. "From Stark rebels," Cersei snapped. Tyrion ignored her and walked forward. "What I have to say concerns all of us." Joffrey rolled his eyes. "If this is another boring war report." "It's not about war," Tyrion cut in sharply. He reached into his coat and slowly placed the piece of dragonglass onto the table. The black stone gleamed under candlelight. "What is this?" Tywin asked. "Proof," Tyrion said quietly. Proof of what? Cersei demanded. Tyrion looked each of them in the eye. Proof that the real enemy is not Robb Stark. Silence filled the chamber. The enemy, Tyrion continued, voice steady, is already marching, and it does not care who sits on the Iron Throne. Tywin's expression did not change. Explain yourself, he ordered. Tyrion took a slow breath. The dead are walking. Joffrey laughed loudly. You expect us to believe ghost stories. But Tywin did not laugh. He simply stared at Tyrion, searching for weakness. And for the first time in his life, Tyrion did not look away. The silence in the small council chamber felt heavier than armor. Joffrey was still smiling, amused by what he thought was a foolish tale. Cersei looked irritated, but Tywin Lannister, he was studying Tyrion very carefully. The dead are walking, Joffrey repeated mockingly. Shall we invite them to dinner as well? Tyrion did not react. He kept his eyes on his father. I saw them, Tyrion said calmly. Hundreds, maybe thousands, and they do not tire. They do not fear. They do not stop. Cersei scoffed. This is some northern trick. Was the burned village south of the neck also a trick? Tyrion asked quietly. That made Tywin's eyes shift slightly. What village? Tywin asked. Tyrion stepped closer to the table. A small one. No banners. No battle signs. The people were frozen solid. No wounds. Just cold and empty. Tywin folded his hands behind his back. Even if such a threat exists, he said slowly, it is far from here. For now, Tyrion replied. Joffrey stood suddenly. Enough of this nonsense. The North rebels. Stannis gathers ships, and you speak of fairy tales. Tyrion turned toward his nephew. Your Grace, he said carefully, if you ignore this, you will not have a kingdom left to rule. Joffrey's face darkened. Careful. Cersei stepped in front of her son. You went to Robb Stark, didn't you? The accusation hung in the air. Tyrion did not deny it. I met him. Joffrey's hand went to his sword. Traitor. Tywin raised a hand slightly. Joffrey stopped. Why? Tywin asked quietly. That single word carried more danger than a blade. Tyrion swallowed once but kept his voice steady. Because this war weakens us. Bolton has betrayed Stark. The North is divided. If the dead reach them now, they fall. And if the North falls, we are next. Tywin's face remained unreadable. You propose an alliance, he asked. I propose survival. Cersei laughed bitterly. Cersei laughed bitterly. You would side with walls against your own blood. Tyrion looked at her directly. Blood did not protect me from you. Her face hardened with rage. Tywin finally moved toward the table and picked up the dragon glass shard. He turned it slowly in his hand. And you claim this kills them? Yes. And if this is all a lie? Tyrion met his father's eyes. Then execute me. The room froze. Joffrey's smile returned slowly. I like that idea, but Tywin did not speak for several long seconds. Finally, he set the dragon glass down. If what you say is true, Tywin said calmly, we require confirmation. Tyrion felt a small spark of hope. Send men north, Tyrion suggested. Quietly, see the villages, speak to survivors. And if they confirm it? Tywin asked. Then we unite, Tyrion said. Or we all die separately. Tywin turned toward the window, looking out at King's Landing. Leave us, he ordered Cersei and Joffrey. Joffrey looked angry but obeyed. Cersei gave Tyrion one last hateful look before leaving. Now only father and son remained. You have always been clever, Tywin said without turning. But clever men often mistake themselves for wise. And proud men mistake silence for safety, Tyrion replied softly. Tywin turned slowly. If I discover you are playing your own game. I am, Tyrion interrupted quietly, but not against you. Tywin's eyes narrowed. For the first time, Tyrion continued, I am playing for the realm. Silence filled the room again. Finally, Tywin spoke. I will send men north, quietly. If your story proves false, your life ends. Tyrion nodded. Fair. And if it proves true? Tywin paused slightly. Yes? Tyrion asked. Then we prepare. For the first time in years, Tyrion felt he had moved his father, even slightly. As Tyrion left the chamber, Varys appeared from the shadows. You have stirred a dangerous storm, Varys said softly. Tyrion exhaled slowly. The storm was already coming. Far to the north, Winterfell stood strong, but fear had reached its walls. Robb was gathering banners again. Jon was training men with dragon glass weapons. And beyond the wall, the Night King stood on a frozen cliff, watching the southern lands. More dead joined his army every hour, but now the living had begun to move as well. The lion had warned the rel, the wolf was preparing, and the Game of Thrones was no longer about power, it was about survival. The days that followed felt like the world was holding its breath. Tywin Lannister moved quickly but quietly. Riders were sent north in secret, disguised as traders and messengers. Gold changed hands in dark corners. Ravens flew at night instead of day. The official story in King's Landing was simple. The crown was preparing for Stannis Baratheon, but beneath that lie, something else was happening. Tyrion worked without rest. He met with blacksmiths in hidden alleys, ordering weapons tipped with dragonglass. He convinced Pycelle to send for old scrolls from the citadel about the long night. He whispered to city guards, spreading careful fear. Not panic. Fear. Enough to prepare. One evening, a rider returned. He was half frozen. His horse collapsed at the gates. Tywin, Tyrion, Varys, and several commanders gathered in a private chamber as the man was brought inside. Speak, Tywin commanded. The rider trembled. It's true, he whispered. Villagers gone. Corps walking. We saw them with our own eyes. Lord Bolton's lands are empty. Winterfell prepares for siege, but not by men. Silence. Even Tywin's calm mask cracked slightly. How far? Tyrion asked quietly. Moving south. Slow. Moving south. Slow, but endless. Tywin dismissed the rider. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Tywin looked at Tyrion. You were right. Those 3 words felt heavier than victory. What now? Varys asked softly. Tywin's voice turned sharp and commanding. Send ravens, all banners, Lannister, Tyrell, even Baratheon if needed. This is no longer a matter of crowns. Tyrion felt something shift in that moment. Pride had stepped aside for necessity. But there was no time to celebrate. Winterfell was already under attack. Snow fell heavily over the castle walls as the army of the dead surrounded it like a silent ocean. Torches burned day and night. Dragonglass arrows were stacked high. Robb Stark stood on the battlements, watching the endless white figures below. Jon Snow stood beside him. They're waiting, Robb said. No, Jon replied. He's waiting. As if summoned by the words, the Night King stepped forward from the army. Blue eyes locked onto the castle. Then he raised both arms. Every fallen body outside the walls rose again. The siege began. For days, Winterfell held. Fire rained down, dragonglass cut through icy flesh, but for every one that fell, 2 more climbed over the bodies. Inside the castle, fear grew. Then on the 4th morning, horns echoed from the south, real horns, Lannister horns. Golden banners appeared through the snow. Behind them marched forces from the Reach and the Stormlands, and at their center rode Tyrion Lannister beside his father. Robb stared in disbelief. They came. Jon allowed himself a small breath of relief. Tyrion rode forward under a white flag as gates opened briefly. He dismounted inside Winterfell's courtyard. For a second, he simply looked around at the snow-covered castle. You look terrible, he told Jon. Jon almost smiled. You're late. Tyrion looked at Robb. We brought fire. Outside the walls, Tywin Lannister himself commanded the southern armies. For once, lions and wolves stood side by side. The final battle began at dusk. Flaming catapults launched fire into the sea of dead. Dragonglass spears pierced icy armor. The living fought not for banners, but for breath. Jon rode out with a small force, cutting through the chaos toward the Night King. Robb followed. Tyrion stayed near the command lines, directing wildfire barrels into tight clusters of whites. The field became a storm of fire and snow. Jon finally reached him. The Night King dismounted from an undead horse, sword of ice in hand. They faced each other in the middle of death. Jon attacked first. Steel clashed with ice. The sound cracked like thunder. Robb joined, striking from the side. The Night King fought without fear. Jon was knocked down. Robb was thrown back. The icy blade rose to strike Jon, and suddenly a flaming spear pierced the Night King's chest. Tywin Lannister had thrown it. For a brief second, the Night King looked down at the burning dragonglass tip. Jon seized the moment. He drove his sword, tipped with dragonglass, straight into the Night King's heart. A scream like shattering glaciers echoed across the battlefield, and then everything stopped. The dead froze, cracked, and collapsed into lifeless snow. Silence spread slowly. The long night had ended before it truly began. The living stood in shock. Lions, wolves, southerners, northerners, alive. Tyrion walked slowly toward Jon and Robb. "Well," he said softly, looking at the fallen Night King, "that changes the game." Robb looked at the southern army beside his own. "No more game." Tywin stepped forward, snow on his armor. "For now," he said calmly, "we rebuild." Jon looked at both houses standing together. "For the living," he said again. This time, thousands of voices answered, and for the first time in the history of Westeros, the lion and the wolf did not stand as enemies. They stood as survivors.